Can you think of a time where you learned of something that you believed was real and then you learned it was fake? I wonder if you could think about that. I've been going through these moments with my kids recently because they're kids, right? And so things that they have learned are not real, but they thought were real. Maybe you've been tricked into thinking something was real before and then you learned out it was fake. I don't know if you feel like you're easily tricked or you're gullible. I can tell you, I remember when I was younger, when I was a kid, when I found out that WWE wrestling wasn't real. This is that moment for you, for some of you. Yeah, man, I was crushed. I bought into the show. I thought all of it was real. And, man, I was so disappointed and severely made fun of when I found out that wrestling stuff wasn't real. Which is just a silly example, but I want you to think about something a little bit more personal. What if you found out that one of your friends wasn't real? Not like a make-believe friend, okay? Not like you see. If that's you, then let's talk about something else later. But like not like you're seeing friends, like you have a make-believe friend. But what if you found out, honestly, that one of your friends wasn't a real friend? That they didn't have your back like you thought they did, and I'd be willing to bet, like, you've probably had some of these experiences before as a teenager. You probably experienced something in your life where someone who you thought had your back actually didn't have your back. Or someone that you thought that you could trust, you actually found out you couldn't trust them. Someone that you thought wouldn't tell, told. And you have these moments in life where you have these friends, and then something happens, all of a sudden you're like, man, were they ever really my friend? I know that I've had those moments, and I bet you know that feeling. We all know that feeling. Eventually, at some point, you will learn whether you have a real friend or a fake friend. A lot of times we learn that the hard way, right? We learn the hard way of whether someone really has our back. The question that I want us to wrestle with tonight, and really as we dive into this series, is this question, is how do I make sure I am a real friend, right? If we were to focus on us first, and before we talk about like our friends and all that kind of stuff, how do I make sure that I am a real friend to my friends? Because we would all want that. Right? We would all want to be described as a real friend, and that's really what we're going to get to the bottom of, is how do we become a good friend, and how do we become a real friend? Because here's the deal. We all would say, on some level, we have a lot of friends, right? We'll have people that we sit with at lunch, or that we sit by in class, or even that we do things with, or we're on a team with, or in a choir with, or whatever. But if we're really, really, really honest, a lot of those people are more like acquaintances. Like we know them, we know what they're into. It's really easy to have a lot of surface level relationships and friendships. It's actually a lot harder to have a lot of or many, or even a handful of several deep, real friendships. People who truly love you, who care about you, and who want what is best for you. That's what we want to get to. That's what I want you to become. That's what I want you to be surrounded by. And so that's what we're going to talk about. Tonight, what I'm going to share with you is just this idea of what it means to be present with your friends when life gets hard. I want to tell you a story. A couple of years ago, I have a group of friends that I'm really close with, and one of my friends, we found out that he lost his job. It was a surprise. It was a shock to him. He went into his job one day at his office, and they were like, we're letting you go. And he was like obviously devastated, right, because it was just a surprise. And so his wife had actually texted us and let us know that this had happened, and so we were messaging back and forth trying to get the details, and just learned that he was just crushed by this. And so we decided, now this was actually really hard for me as well, because where my friend worked, his company had a platinum membership to Topgolf. And I don't know if you know what that means, but you can go to Topgolf anytime and play for free for hours and hours and hours. So I was hurt by this as well, okay? But we learned that that he was crushed because he lost his job. And so me and my two other friends, who we were really good friends, all four of us, we put aside everything that was on our calendar for the next morning. We got together and we went and had breakfast with him. Now, when we did this, we didn't have all the answers, right? We didn't come with like, hey, here's your next job. We got some stuff. We pulled together some strings, It wasn't like that. It was like, hey, how are you? How are you doing? How are you feeling? And we just listened. And we were just there for him, and we just prayed with him. We couldn't fix his problem, but we were just present with him. And that's really, if you don't remember anything, I think that you'll get this idea, as at the most basic level, this is what I want you to understand. Sometimes just being present with your friends is enough when they're going through a difficult time. And so how can you be there for your friends when life gets hard is what we're going to talk about. Because having someone with you when life gets difficult is what we all would want from a friend, right? When life gets hard, some of us might say, well, I don't really want that, but deep down, no one really wants to be alone when life is hard. Earlier this year, we had to make the difficult decision to put our dog down. And Shelby and I had this dog since basically when we got married. A few months after we got married, we got our dog. His name was Duke. He was a little Shih Tzu, nice little cute pup. And we had to put him down in January. And what was most difficult about this, if you ever had to say goodbye to a pet, or it's really hard, right? Because it's part of your family. And when I had to do this, I was all by myself. I took him to the vet. I had to make the decision to put him down, and we put him down, and I was alone in that office. I was alone on the ride home. I was alone for the rest of that day because my family was at school, and it was hard. In these moments like that, although that's talking about a pet, when life is hard and you are by yourself, it makes it even harder. And so a real friend knows how and when to show up for their friends when life gets difficult, right? So the challenge for us is to be those type of friends that know when to show up and how to show up. To give you this illustration, we're going to look at the story of Job, just real briefly at the beginning of the story of Job. If you've grown up in church, you're probably familiar with Job's story. Job was described as a righteous man, and Job's story is actually a really, really old story, okay? So when you look at your Bible, you got your big Bible, and you know how the Bible starts with Genesis. Job isn't next to Genesis. It's in the middle by Psalms or whatever, but it's actually based in the Genesis era. It's one of the oldest stories in the Bible. And so Job is a very, very ancient story. And it goes kind of like this, that Job was a righteous man. He did all the right things the right ways and all this kind of stuff. But all these disasters struck Job's life. He had a handful, 7 kids, and they were all killed in a storm. He lost all of his cattle and sheep and all that kind of stuff. He lost all of that. And then at the very end, his body was covered with sores, excruciating, painful sores from head to toe. I mean, he was just in a really, really crummy place. And I don't know if you remember this from the story of Job, but after we learn of all these bad things that happened to him, his wife, who's still there with him, she says, Job, what are you hanging on to? Curse God and die. That was her advice to Job in this moment. That's how bad things had got. And so all these bad things happened to Job, but actually what happens next is really interesting. It's going to be on the screen here. It's Job chapter 2, verses 11 through 13. It says, when 3 of Job's friends heard of the tragedy he had suffered, they got together and traveled from their homes to comfort and console him. When they saw Job from a distance, they scarcely recognized him. Wailing loudly, they tore their robes and threw dust into the air over their heads to show their grief. Then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and nights. No one said a word to Job, for they saw that his suffering was too great for words. I want you just to imagine that scene. Can you do that? I know that when we read the Bible, it's kind of hard to do this, but just imagine. Picture Job somewhere in this ancient land, probably next to a fire, just disgruntled from what life has done to him. His body is in pain. He's just there, and his friends are just sitting in a circle around him. No one's saying a word. They're just there. And that's really, honestly, if I'm being honest with you, that's the only picture that I really want you to walk away with tonight, is the presence of his friends. They sit on the ground for 7 days, and they don't say a word. You think that you could do that? Honestly, you think that you could do it? Some of you can't sit still for 7 minutes, right? And then you're getting antsy. You go to school for 7 hours and you're ready to pull your hair out. You can't wait to get out of there, right? The answer is probably no. To do something like this, to sit for 7 days in silence. I mean, if we were to sit here in this moment, if I were just to stand here for 7 minutes in silence, like you'd be uncomfortable. It would, like, some of you'd leave. Like, it would just be weird, right? But this is what they do. For 7 days and 7 nights, they just sit there. Now, this sounds bizarre, but it's actually an ancient Jewish custom called sitting Shiva. I don't know if you've ever heard of this before. It's kind of around the Bible, a couple different places, but sitting Shiva, most people actually believe it originated with Job's story because it's actually such an ancient story in the Bible. But it's this Jewish culture of a 7-day mourning period in Judaism where relatives, after the loss of someone close to them, right? So what they would do is that they would just show up for 7 days of mourning and grief just to show that they care about the person or the family. And so in this tradition, what would happen is that, if I lost someone close to me in my family, maybe other family or very close people to me would come and they would sit Shiva for 7 days. And they would come to my home and they would take care of things in my home. They would maybe cook, they would maybe clean, they would maybe just be there. They would just sit with me. And so the tradition says that people in sitting Shiva would sit on mats, or they would sit on low stools and just be present with the people who are mourning, or they would light a candle, the same candle for all 7 days, and just be there. They'd cover the mirrors and the windows in the house just to create this atmosphere of, we're here for you. And so sitting Shiva actually looks a lot different for Jewish families, depending on how you look at it, but the purpose of sitting Shiva was always to make sure that people who are grieving are not alone. That's the whole idea behind it, and this originates with Job's story. Job, who's grieving, who is struggling, who is wrestling, his friends, they show up in this moment because, again, grieving alone is hard. Job's friends got that. The Jewish people get this. They understand this, and so they practice this to be present with the people around them. So I want you to think about this, because tonight's a little bit more about a principle than it is like, hey, here's like point 1, point 2, point 3, here's what you need to know. It's more about an idea that I want you to wrestle with when we talk about friendship, because to understand what it takes to be a real friend, a true friend, you've got to understand what you need to do and how to behave when someone close to you is going through something hard. So I want you to think about this, because sitting Shiva had to deal with grief, mourning, loss for a family relative in Judaism. I want you to think about what it looks like for you. What could the difficult things look like for you as a teenager, as a high school student, for your friends? Now, maybe it is grief. Maybe you do have friends that, they lose grandparents, or, they've experienced some type of tragedy. That certainly happens. But there's also other minor things that happen, if we were just to make this a principle in our lives, that you guys deal with as teenagers. Maybe you got cut from a team, or you didn't make the choir, or you didn't get the part that you wanted, or maybe you lost a relationship with someone, or you broke up with a boyfriend or a girlfriend, or maybe you got hurt and you got injured, right? Maybe things at home aren't great and your parents are fighting, and that's not a great atmosphere for you. Or maybe you're struggling with school and you have these expectations that either you've placed on yourself or someone else has placed on you for grades, or what you need to do to get into college, or the level of performance that you need to have, and you're not meeting them. And so that's difficult. Maybe just in life in general, you're not enjoying life like you think that you're supposed to. And there's no one reason why, but you just feel like that's where you're at right now. Here's what I'm trying to say. Life is hard. And it gets harder. I'm not going to lie to you, okay? But even as a high school student, life can be hard. The things that you deal with are hard, and nobody, even as a high school student, you shouldn't have to do it alone. You shouldn't have to wrestle with these things alone. You shouldn't have to wander and think about these things alone without having someone there. A real friend is someone who knows how to show up and when to show up for a friend who's in need. Job's friends got this. They knew it instinctively, right? They knew that they needed to sit Shiva with Job, and so they proved that they were real friends by going, right? And so here's what I like. Do you remember what it said, what they did, right? It said that they set off to comfort and console him. Now, sometimes when I read the Bible, I like to look at different translations. And one of the translations I look at is the NASB, okay, New American Standard Bible. And the reason I look at that is because it's the most literal translation of the Bible, okay? NIV, NLT, everything kind of takes its own like interpretation of things and puts it in our language. The NASB takes like the original language, tries to make it as literal as possible. And when we look at this verse in the NASB, this is what it says. It says, talking about his friends, they made an appointment together to come and to sympathize with him and comfort him, right? To sympathize with Job. Now, sympathy is, at its most basic level is like feeling sorry for someone, right? It's feeling sorry for someone when something bad has happened to them. Now, here's what I want you to see about Job's friends is they didn't do that from afar. They did that with Job. And here's what I think is true. I think it's true for me. It's easy for us to have this attitude where it's like, well, I learn of something that somebody's going through something and I feel bad for them. We'll pray for them. I've sat in so many circles where we share prayer requests of other people. Oh yeah, I feel bad for them. There's a difference between having sympathy for someone because you heard of something that's going on in their life or a sickness or something like that, and having sympathy with them, to be with them, to be next to them, to be in their presence. That's a different type of sympathy, and that's what his friends did. So how can you be the type of friend that cares? I want to give you some practical ideas because although tonight is a principle, I want to give you some ideas that you could take home, okay? So these ideas are going to look very similar across any bad thing that could happen, from the greatest bad thing to like a minor bad thing in my life. You could just apply it to whatever you're dealing with your friends. Here's the first one, is to let them know that you're there. And here's why I put this on there, is whatever that looks like, you need to make sure that you say it or show it in some way, right? It's real easy to feel that sympathy. I feel bad for you. I feel bad for you that something happened to you. It's another thing I want to feel bad with you. I want to be by your side. I want to walk with you through this. And so I would just encourage you is to let them know that you're there. Send the text, make the call, show up, be present, physically show up on some level to let them know that you are there for them. So that's the first one. Make sure that they know that you are there. The second one is just to listen. Oftentimes, the best thing that we can do when someone is hurting or someone's going through something difficult is just to listen. Now, here's why I say listen, because not everybody wants you to solve their problems. I don't know if you know this or not, okay? I do this in marriage counseling when I talk to couples who are getting married, because there's a difference between men and women with this. Men, when they hear a problem, we want to say, okay, I do this with my wife, okay? So it's like if I hear she comes home from school, she's a 5th grade teacher, so she's got problems every day when she comes home from school. It's like, here's what happened. And my initial tendency is to say, well, did you try this? Well, did you do this? Well, have you thought about this? And like I try to fix the problems by giving solutions. And sometimes, not always because she's pretty kind, but sometimes she'll look at me and she'll just say, I don't need your help. Like, I just want you to listen. I just want you to listen. I just need to unload this. And sometimes in a friendship, that's all that you have to do. You don't have to fix your friend's problems. You don't have to offer all the solutions. You don't have to know what their next step is. Sometimes a good friend, all they have to do when someone's going through something difficult is just to listen and just to be there and just to hear what they need to say in that moment. So even if you don't know how to fix their problem or you don't know what to do, just listen, just sympathize, just be there. Does that make sense? So here's the third thing, and this is going to be real churchy, is to pray for them. And I don't expect you to be like, oh, I never thought about that, right? But it's like, do we do this? Do you pray for your friends? Especially someone who is going through something difficult. How many times, and I'll be honest with you, I've been here too, how many times have someone said something to you, or you've been in a small group circle or something like that, and you say, oh yeah, I'll be praying for you. Are we doing that? Are we doing that? To be a real friend, you've got to figure this part out too. To be praying for your friends, and I would honestly say to be praying with your friends. right? And what I mean by that is maybe you would have the guts on some level when someone says, yeah, I'm struggling with this, or I'm dealing with this, or here's the bad thing that happened to you. Could it be possible that you could grow in your faith at some level and say, can I pray with you right now? Because I will tell you, there is a difference when I share things with people and someone says, oh, Matt, I'll be praying for you. There's a difference when I leave the conversation with that, because I've also had conversations with people, and these are bold people, where they say, can I pray with you right now? And that leaves a different type of impact on me. That shows me a little bit more of like, whoa, they really care. And they want to show me they care right now. I would encourage you and challenge you. Maybe not with everybody. I know that's hard, and you got to be vulnerable, but like, could you pray not just for your friends, but with your friends? So here's what I want you to do tonight, just as a way to help us to remember this. Up here on both the speakers and one down front, we have these mats. They look like this. And it's real simple. It's just a paper mat. But I just wanted to give these to you guys as a reminder of this story, of what it looks like to sit Shiva with a friend. You don't have to have the answers. You don't have to fix the problems. You don't have to do any of those things. You just have to be present. You just have to be there. And so in the ancient Jewish culture, what they would do is, if it wasn't a stool, they would bring a mat, and they would take these and they would just sit, and they would just be present, and they would just be around the person who is hurting, who is in pain, who is grieving. And maybe for you, that's what you need to do with one of your friends. To be a real friend is to, maybe you've been intimidated, like, I don't know what to do. Well, maybe you don't have to do anything but just to be there, and just to make sure that they know that you're there. And so the beautiful thing about this, I think, is that the reality is that God has already displayed a perfect friendship for us, right? What this looks like. He is always with us. He has never left us. Never once has God ever left us in any of the problems that we've had. And the challenge for us is to be that type of friend for other people in our lives, to be Christ-like to the people in our lives. So I want you to take a minute as I hold this, is just to think about who's a friend who needs you right now. Like, who is someone in your life that's struggling? Is someone who's going through a tough time, someone who has maybe even experienced loss lately. Doesn't have to be loss of a person, but maybe they've lost something. Maybe they're hurting. Maybe they're facing a difficulty. Who just needs someone in their corner? Someone that will audibly say, hey, I'm here for you. I'm with you. I'm by your side. Because I'd be willing to bet, as a high school student, there's a lot of people that need to know that. I want you to think about this right now, and I don't want you to overthink this. Okay, I don't want you to, like, who's a perfect person? Like, who's the names that are coming to your mind right now? That's probably who the Holy Spirit is prompting you to think about. All right, this doesn't have to be a science. It's just show up, be present. I want this mat to be a reminder, if you can make it home with this and not crumble it and throw it away, just to be a reminder to you to be real, to be present in someone's life, to show up for them, to listen to them, to pray for them, all of those things, right? And so I'm going to pray, and Zach's going to play for just a little bit. And as he's playing, just come up and grab one. You don't have to do it all at once. Just take a moment. We'll have time to do it. There's no special thing here, but grab a mat. Maybe pray for that friend right here in this moment. Maybe they're here. And you could practice one of those things right now. I don't know. Start with yourself. Be a real friend this week. The bottom line is to be present with your friends when life is hard. We would all want that for ourselves. Let's be those type of people that do that for others. Let's be the real friends by showing up for our friends when life is difficult.